Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Kathleen and today I want to talk about the connection between corruption and terrorism and criminality in Kenya. So corruption and terrorism are major emotive topics in Kenya's socio-economic and political discourse. Day in, day out, there's a constant call for let's end corruption, let's end insecurity and terrorism in the country. Talk about corruption in the country and talk of major corruption scandals such as Goldenberg, Anglo Leasing, NYS 1, NYS 2, the Macy scandals, the fake arms deal, and several corruption cases that have been reported across the counties in the country. Talk about individuals who are embezzling public funds for their own use. Talk about police officers who engage in bribery. Talk about security personnel and state officials who engage in illicit trade of sugar and charcoal from Somalia. Talk about ghost workers and talk about nepotism when it comes to the recruitment and promotion of security officers. So from the security sector, when we talk about corruption, at least 5 indicators are revealed. Nepotism in recruitment and promotion of officers, ghost workers, theft and delayed and poor payment of soldiers, bribery, illicit economic activities by security personnel who have been sent on peacekeeping missions. On the other hand, when we talk about terrorism, Kenya has had a large share of terror attacks when compared to its neighboring countries like Ethiopia, Uganda, and Tanzania. Talk about terror attacks in Kenya and mention the 1980 bombing of the Norfolk Hotel, the 1998 bombing of the US Embassy that left more than 200 people dead, the 2013 Westgate Mall attack that claimed 67 lives, the 2016 University of Garissa attack that claimed 147 lives, the 2019 Dusit 2 hotel attack, and the 2020 attack on the US military base in Lamu. And those are just a few, because we have had other terror attacks in counties such as Garissa, Mandela, Lamu, Mpeketoni, and Kwale that have claimed lives, destroyed property, and left the common citizen in a state of fear, not knowing whether they are safe today and tomorrow they will not be safe, or not knowing when the next attack will take place. Now, Kenya joined other countries across the world in war against terrorism. And there's always been a constant call and a constant promise from the government that the country is working towards preventing and reducing terror attacks. A lot of efforts have been put, right from financing to policy formulation and implementation, evidence in the security sector reforms that the country has had. Kenya has one of the best counter-terror strategies across the globe. Talk about counter-terror strategies in the country and speak of the 2016 counter-terror strategy, 2014 Security Law Amendment Act, the National Counterterrorism Center, the Prevention of Terrorism 2012 Act of 2012, the Prevention of Organized Crime Act of 2010, and the Usalama Watch 2016. This is in addition to the call to add the number of police officers, increased budgetary allocation towards security, and so forth. However, despite the existence of all these strategies, Kenya continued to face the threat of terrorism in its soils. So I asked myself why this is the case. And I tried to figure out what is the relationship between Kenya's increased corruption rate and Kenya's increasing terrorism rate. So I came to a point where I said there's a very close relationship between terror attacks and criminality in Kenya and the corruption rate in the country. When you look at the 2019 Global Corruption Index by the Transparency International, Kenya was ranked number 137 out of 180. Its neighbor Tanzania was position 96, Ethiopia was position 96, and Somalia was position 180. And when you look at the Global Terror Index by the Institute for Economics and Peace in 2019, Kenya was position 21, Somalia was number 6, Ethiopia was 29, and Uganda was number 49. So when you look at the corruption index globally and the terror index globally, you find that there's a close relationship between the position a country is taking in corruption and the position it is taking in terrorism. So the higher the corruption index, the higher the terror rate. So I used those statistics and I came to a conclusion that Kenya's problem within the security sector begins with Kenya's corruption issues. Why? Corruption undermines governance, economy, health, social order, and sustainable development. And this undermined state leaves the common citizens in a miserable situation, hopeless, jobless, without hope for tomorrow. Such citizens then easily fall prey of terror radicalization. That's why and that's how the country ends up having terrorists within its boundaries. In a way, what I'm trying to say is the lopsided society as a result of corruption then promotes the practicability of the youth purge theory. We have so many youths in Kenya who are jobless, who can't trust the government, who don't have the hope for tomorrow, being exposed by the same government to radicalization because of corruption. If it were not for corruption, these youths could be having jobs. These youths could be leading better lives. These youths could be living in better environment. But because of corruption, these youths do not have space. They have been choked. And therefore, we leave them more vulnerable and they are easily preyed on by the terrorists and other criminal groups. Number two, terror groups depend on smuggling of arms that require collusion of the security personnel. When we look at the Kenya-Somalia border, it is a border that is under security watch 24/7. But still we have illegal arms entering the country. We have illegal people entering the country. We have terrorists entering the country all the way from Somalia and calling attacks in Nairobi. So bribes play a very great role in the facilitation of this illegal entry of terrorists and illegal entry of illegal weapons and arms in Kenya's soils. So the entry of these weapons into the country becomes easy because a security officer somewhere has not been well paid. And because he has not been well paid, here comes a terrorist or a criminal group that wants to pay him 100,000 for their vehicle to just enter into the country without being checked. So this officer falls easily into this trap, not because he so wishes, but because the payment, the work conditions, the living conditions just pushes him to that corner. If you want to see the role primarily of border officials can do to a country in terms of terrorism, the Mumbai port scandal that later transformed to the attack of the of the city is a good example. The corruption officers, the officers at the Mumbai port were corrupted, and they allowed weapons that were later used in the attack of the city. Another example is in northern Russia. The terrorists who attacked a school in Beslan bribed a police officer who drove them around the city using a police vehicle. These are lessons that Kenya should be learning from other countries. Perhaps this is happening in the country, or perhaps it's likely to happen. According to Nordic Africa Institute 2016, by 2016, crooked, corrupt officers in Kenya had allowed over 100 illegal migrants into the country. These are the people who went into the country, and we do not know their missions, we do not know their activities, we do not know who they are working for, and somebody is given money to allow such people to enter into the country. And that's how terrorists find their way to their destinations. Somebody is given very little money and they are able to get their leeway. So they stay within the country for over 2 years, learning the environment, doing their survey, gathering intelligence, and setting their equipment ready for a mega attack. And that's how most of the time, most terror attacks that have happened in the country gets our country unaware. Why? These terror groups or the terrorists have stayed in the country for a long time. They have mastered the terrain. They have known the exits. They have known the entry points. They know the response rate from the police officers whenever there's a problem. They know how they can even manipulate that response rate and they delay it. So these are the people who went into the country and for a long time possible set themselves ready for a one-day attack. So All this happens because illegal people enter into the country and we don't know where they are entering, where they are going to live, why they are entering, where they are going to live, and so forth. Another thing is that corruption in peacekeeping missions undermines the capacity to restore peace and order. We have our KDF soldiers in Somalia under AMISOM. But sometimes back we had an outcry that these soldiers are participating in illicit trade on charcoal and sugar from Somalia. This illicit trade facilitates the financing of criminal groups. So in a way, we're just saying that our own police officers are participating in activities that finances a terror group. So the partnership between the warlords and entrepreneurs of war and a few officers who are ready to make extra money, perhaps because they are poorly paid, acts as a gateway to promoting the financing of terror groups and the criminal groups in the country. So it's like we pushed criminal groups, we pushed the terror groups through illicit trade and illegal activities. Embezzlement of public funds leaves a country broke and vulnerable and unable to fund its security forces. Whenever we have funds that have been allocated, for example, to security, and somebody somewhere takes these funds or even steals a section of those funds, it means that there are logistics in the security sector that are not going to take place successfully because somebody somewhere has embezzled the public funds that are supposed to do that work. That's why we have our police officers always poorly paid. Our security personnel live under very poor conditions. They even don't have job morale because they are poorly paid, they live under very poor conditions, yet they sacrifice their lives to go to the war fronts. And not that the country doesn't have the money that it can use to improve the salaries and the living conditions of these people. It is because the country's financial resources have been channeled towards the pockets of few individual corrupt people in the country. So you see, the embezzlement of public funds not only makes the development of roads and everything a problem, no, it also goes down to affecting individual sectors, and the security sector cannot be left behind. And it's also fairly funny that despite the fact that corruption is a problem in the country, our security sector reforms and terror strategies rarely mention about corruption. And so are the action plans towards preventing radicalization and terrorism in Kuala and Mombasa, which was supposed to be the model counties for Lamu and Tana River. So basically, Kenya's insecurity is not because of the absence of the law or counter-terror strategies. Kenya's constant terror attacks and insecurity, it is because of corruption that has undermined the institutional capacity of various bodies to provide security to Kenyans and to guard Kenya's borders. So mine is a simple call to the security agencies, to the leaders of the country that yes, we have the 4P agenda, we have Vision 2030, and we have the Sustainable Development Goals. Yes, it's good to have all these visions, but we need to have one major agenda. The agenda of bringing corruption to an end. If we bring corruption to an end, then the Sustainable Development Goal number 16 on security and peace will be easily achieved. We will be able to achieve the 4 major agendas and implement them fully if we have security in the country. No development, no economic growth takes place in an environment of violence and security. And therefore, for us to end the violence, the insecurity, and the terror crisis in the country, we need to bring bribery, illicit trade, nepotism, and all other forms of corruption to an end in the country. We need to fight one simple war, the war against corruption. Only through succeeding in this war that we can succeed in the war against terrorism.